was far too large to rightfully be called a sword. It was larger, thicker, heavier, and cruder than any normal blade. By all accounts, it was no more than a hulking mass of iron.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, it's DumpStat. I'm Arch Lich Brill. And next to me, of course, is my ever co-host, not Doc, it's the Kobold again. Hello, a cleric, how are you?
Hello.
How are you today?
Man, every time I feel more and more appreciated with these openings.
I'm just
great.
Just cut you down more, because frankly, Doc the fighter, he's level 12, he's a badass, and then I come into the studio, I sit down, I sip my coffee.
I guess it is a step down.
Yeah, and then there's this little lizard guy who wanders up like, hello, I'm here to do a recording. It's like, great, all right, come on. Let's do it. You're doing us a favor. I am happy that for this episode, you got your PhD in giants. So you are an expert, I think? Something? Yes.
Sure.
Okay. That's a very good.
Yes. I am an expert something. Yes.
I feel like that's a lot of what DumpStat is, though. Hi, everybody. We're DumpStat. Is people tune in and are just like, oh, these guys seem pretty smart. And then they hit that one point where we go, and then the other guy goes, I don't know. And that's why drop the intelligence is the tagline. All right. Top of the ticket. I've got some house cleaning to do. 1 second on cleric. We'll get to the giants in the moment.
Okay.
We have a Patreon. We have a Patreon. And that is for our goblin. I almost forgot what he was. I almost was going to say our mind flayer. I almost leveled him up like a Pokemon. No, he's a goblin. He's our editor goblin.
He's on my tier. He's on
your level, yeah. He's our editor. He does amazing work. Anything you see in DumpStat, that being awesome audio, cool thumbnails, audiograms, anything we do, not my memes, those are bad, but anything else quite like that, he makes it and he puts effort into it. So we have some tiers for you. Go to Patreon. Do the scream goblin, exactly.
Heed my words. Patreon.com/DumpStat podcast. We also have a Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi.com/DumpStat podcast. Shout out to Marty McFly. Thanks, bud.
Thank you for screaming. And go there, jump on in, toss us a couple of bucks a month. We really appreciate it. It goes to helping our goblin out so we can keep making amazing product like this. And it also goes right back into the show so we can advertise and get more minions. On top of that, please like, share, subscribe. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, OnlyFans with a cleric over here. He strips and... Oh no, I'm just being rude. And shut up. And we also have, on top of that, we have a awesome new thing we're doing. We're doing a module, Rime of the Frost Maiden, the new Far North campaign from Wizards of the Coast that just came out not too long ago. We are doing an adventure. So whenever you're hearing this, check it out, or soon to check it out. I will be DMing 4 players, possibly 5, through the module and giving helpful tips and advice for DMs to help them through their day, I guess, and how to get through a module and just how to get through Rime of the Frostmaiden in general. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited. Everyone else is super excited. I can't breathe. Oh my God. So giants, giants. I just try to get through it as fast as I can because I had one friend contact me and he's like, I love housekeeping because you try to go really quickly and then you'll forget something and jump back to it. And then it takes a couple of minutes, but you're flustered. I'm sorry, everybody. Giants. So giants are in D&D are weird. And I usually try to give some background or context to the monster or monsters that we're talking about when it comes to D&D. However, the reason why I do that is so that new players and DMs can understand. But in the case of giants, we've all met a big galoot You know what a giant is from folklore. You remember the beanstalk. You remember all this stuff. You remember cyclopses. You remember Goliath. You know from your history, most likely, stories of giant fucking people. And I don't feel like I have to explain that. I have to explain the weirdness that they are in Dungeons and Dragons. Giants are a type of monster and race of things, kind of, and specific types. It's very much. What are giants to you? Give me giants. What are they?
Giants are somehow both one of those ancient tier civilizations and also wandering trouble. They're in a weird place where they're halfway between the fee-fi-fo-fum giant and a dragon tier like presence in the history of the world.
Okay, I can jump in on that just on the basis of in D&D, there are a handful of ancient races that at once enslaved everything, right? Or owned everything.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know when in the world this happened. We don't know if it's in Greyhawk or the Forgotten Realms or Theros or anywhere else. Just in the headcanon kind of all writers, at one point, mind flayers ruled everything, the squid hive mind people. And I mean, frankly, their fuckery made half the monster manual. Way to go. That's true.
Yeah.
Then at one point, dragons ruled at some point, and giants ruled at some point. But here's the issue. When each civilization ruled at what time is The only thing we know is these civilizations ruled, something made them collapse to ruin, and it's heavily implied that giants collapsed because they had a war with dragons, and their dad left, or their all-father god dipped because they lost, or something. So here's a question. What are what are giants in this category? So you got your classic hill giant, right? He's fee-fi-fo-fum, correct?
Well, sort of.
Oh, God.
This is what, so, okay. I've got some problems with giants.
Okay.
Because you can tell that there's different concepts of what a giant should be, and they're not evenly distributed, and they kind of change from edition to edition.
Okay.
So when you picture the fee-fi-fo-fum giant, you're picturing a hill giant.
Okay.
But the fee-fi-fo-fum giant lives in a cloud, which is very much not a hill giant, that's a cloud giant. So already you've got some weird divisions into what a giant is.
Oh, God, this is going to be like math class. Okay, guys, don't worry. I'm a professional. All right, I'm a lich. Everybody calm down. Okay, in that case, but let's just break the different giants down.
Sure.
Because I think we're going to say giants a lot, like the collective, like bam, giants.
Yeah.
There's a ton of them.
Yeah.
I think when people think giants, they just think fee-fi-fo-fum. But in all actuality, there are a multitude of types and subtypes.
You got 6 real ones and a whole bunch of offshoots.
All right, let's go through the main 6. We'll mention the weird cousin offshoots in a moment.
Sure.
But the main 6 are hill giants, which live in grasslands. They're naked and dumb and the smallest of the giants, and probably what an early party will fight, correct? Like an early level?
Yeah. Yeah, they are the most approachable of the giant kind.
Okay, up from there, I guess, is it stone giants?
See, this varies from edition to edition. I believe right now the next smallest is fire giants.
Okay, that's fine.
It like shuffles between stone, fire, and frost as to what the next weakest is. It's sometimes been stone. I think currently it's fire, at least in size.
All right, we'll jump to fire then. Fire giants are a little bit weird. They're like giant dwarfs in a way. They live in volcanoes. They forge incredible armor. They're very tanky. And they live off of that Fire Nation aesthetic. That is essentially a lot of who they are. They are going to be not that crafty. They're kind of big brutes, but they do rule small kingdoms usually. There's usually a surrounding area that bows before them. So immediately there's a jump between these two giants. Hill giants aren't getting bowed to.
No.
They're more bothering the local farmers by eating the cow, and they're hungry and fat. A fire giant is kind of that warlord Fire Nation aesthetic. He's in black armor. He's forged incredible things. There's a giant volcano behind him. It's cool, but that's as far as that goes. Am I right? I think I'm right.
No, yeah. No, fire giants are dwarf-like in a lot of ways. They do a lot of. They're like the other big craftsman race.
Right.
They're not crafty, but they are craftsmen.
Right. They're big galoot warlord things. What's next? Is that stone?
Again, it varies. I think currently it's stone.
Okay, we'll go with stone.
Yeah.
Stone giants are giants who live, strangely enough, underground. They're kind of the kindest of the giants, or at least not as hostile. They live in subterranean caves, usually in the Underdark, which is the big system of evil stuff that lives under the ground. That's what it is. And they kind of just craft rocks, and they don't mine. That's the weird bit. They're not digging for something. I might sound like a complete asshole by saying they're just kind of down there, but I'm gonna say they're just kind of down there. And the reason for it is mainly because they go throughout kind of the Underdark thinking, reflecting, being philosophical, and just digging little weird dreamtime craftsman magics that they do. There definitely seem to be the stranger outliers in influence compared to the other giants. And if you're a party or an adventurer and you come across a stone giant, you might have a better chance talking to it compared to just about all the other ones. So that's nice.
Yeah, they're the artists.
They're the artists. That's a better way of putting it. They are the artists. Yes. I don't know why they're down there, but they're down there. Next would be frost giants, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The big old Vikings.
Big Vikings. Well, up in the tundra, blue skin, they have jarls, kingdoms, they're Vikings, they do raids, they're Vikings, it's cold, they're Vikings. Okay, that's it. They're warriors, they kill things, they stab things, they love Odin, they're Vikings. That's it, full stop. Frost giants, like in Norse mythology, just Vikings. And while that sounds boring, I'm gonna be honest, since there's not a lot of shit up in the tundra, monster manual wise, if you're up there, there's three things you're gonna hit: a Remoraz, a white dragon, and a frost giant, and if you're lucky, maybe a Yeti. Okay, but a frost giant's gonna happen. You're gonna visit one, you're gonna meet the Jarl, you're gonna hang out, it's gonna be fun. So Vikings are dope. It's just they're Vikings. So they're big Vikings. Enjoy. I know I said that 100 times, but there you go. Next up are, and by the way, they're usually bad frost giants, I think.
So far, everyone but the stone giants we talked about is almost always bad.
Right. Cloud giants, magic giants. They're up on a cloud. They have the classic beanstalk thing, but they're usually mages or wizards of some kind. They collect magic objects, and they strangely have a 50-50 alignment. They could be good or they could be evil. Little strange. I believe it's 50-50. I'm not sure. I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
the holdover from older editions.
Yeah, they're just kind of, they're being fairy tale adjacent. They're not like, because here's the thing. The fairy tale is you go up on the cloud and there's a giant, right? Totally cool. Mm-hmm. There's a castle. You go in. It's a giant's castle. Awesome, awesome, awesome. But when you get into the castle, and nowhere in Jack and the Beanstalk does that giant have wizardy aspirations to conquer the world and or heal the sick. It's a very strange Dungeons and Dragons add to it that they are mystical in their magical prowess. So if you're an adventuring party, this is probably a little bit higher up for you. Cloud giants are going to be the giants you're probably going to want to steal from the most. They'll probably have the magic items, and it'll probably be hard to get to them. So that's fun. Mm-hmm. Who are the final giants, Alaric?
So the final giants are the storm giants. They got actually added in later. So for a while, cloud giants were the biggest giant, and that's why they kind of have the feel of being the biggest giant still. The storm giants are like the weird cosmic above it all giants that kind of hang out and do their own stuff. They're the only, they've been consistently labeled as good giants for like edition after edition, but they never really do that much when they're like, they're always described as being there, but they're always also described as not affecting the world very much.
Right.
They have their own things. They do their own stuff. They're cosmically in tune with the universe. But that's kind of the beginning and the ending of what storm giants do. They'll mess you up if you get into a fight with one. But there's very little explanation for the circumstances why you would get into a fight with one, because they're kind of just chilling out, really. Yeah. They know their place in the universe, and that's kind of what they're about.
They're at the highest peaks of a mountaintop or the lowest points in like a trench somewhere.
They'll be under the ocean sometimes.
Yeah, and they're a bit strange in the fact that you're right, that they are cosmically in tune. They understand the motion of the multiverse, and they're constantly thinking about it, but not in the philosopher artist kind of way. In the, I belong. I am here. This is good. And I understand that there are ways to make that cool. I mean, Storm King's Thunder is a module that's based all around giants. And I look at that and I see a fun adventure, but I also see the challenge of making a storm giant, past the aesthetics of him, an interesting persona, right? I think there's a lot of grandiosity behind it. It's a shock bane encounter. If a party encounters a storm giant, they're like, oh, amazing. And then after the conversation, they're just like, he's kind of boring. It's cool. It's still cool, guys. It's cool that we met him, but we thought he'd do a little bit more. And he's like, I am at peace here. That's kind of it. I know my place. My place is here. I see through time. And everyone's like, okay, can you give me more? And he gives you like a cryptic message. And you're like, okay, could you give us some cool magic weapons? And then he goes, no. And he's stern about it. And you're like, that's okay. You know, I'm not going to lie. I like the frost giants more. But at least they drank and I wrestled one. But yeah, those are the main giants. And then you have offshoot giants like the Cyclops. We all know them. They're a giant. I believe, are ogres giants?
Ogres are giants.
Okay.
So are Ettins. Even trolls, according to some editions, classify as giants, but we don't like to talk about that because that's weird and brings up more questions than it answers. So we'll just ignore that. You got the Formorians. Those are giants. I think that's all. You got a couple more like obscure giant types that would show up in like the further monster manuals. Like you got like your desert giants and your woodland giants. Sure. But those have never really stuck in the same way as the big six.
Question. Oni, right? The magic ogres, they're giants, right?
I don't remember what Oni are in 5e because they've definitely tried to pull them away from being just the Japanese ogre. Right. Because they are much more of a spiritual demon-y thing in actual Japanese mythology. So to just make them, the magic ogres doesn't quite ring true in the same way it used to.
Hilarious. It's a large giant. Anyways. I just looked it up because I knew there was going to be that one guy going, just Google it, Google.
All right.
Yeah, I got it. I had to study the tomes and I found it because I'm a very powerful lich. So you have the big six and they stick, and then there's all these strange offshoots, and they're all kind of clumped together because throughout human culture, there's always been stories about big people. But to bring them all together, to have Oni and Vikings and like kind of the Jack and the Beanstalk myth, they all get kind of grafted together as this one big kind of derpy family. And trolls too. Trolls are actually doubled down kind of as giants because in Volo's guide, they have variants for the big six that they all have specialty yada yadas. And the variant for the frost giant is a frost giant who essentially got the power, the regeneration power from the troll god because they're tight somehow or something. and then they get exiled. It's a very strange piece of lore that, while a cool encounter, I still don't know how I would do it.
Strange piece of lore is a very accurate description for giants in general, if I'm honest.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't really line up.
Okay.
I think it's mostly to do with the fact that they've been around for a lot of editions.
Oh, yeah.
But you can tell that there's some people with real different ideas of what giants are about.
Well, it's because they're, like I said, they're like dragons in the sense that they're in every culture. But unlike dragons, D&D had a very good way to kind of handle the dragon problem, which is give them colors, break them down by colors. And they tried to kind of do the same thing with giants. Here's hill giants, here's this giant, here's that giant, and they very reflect what they tried to do with dragons. But the problem is, in all cultures, a big lizard is a big lizard. But in not all cultures is just a big human is a big human. In some cultures, they have one eye. In some cultures, they have more magic. It was an easier way to streamline dragons into camps of good and evil than it was for giants to kind of cobble together lore. So, looking at the lore for giants, where should we begin? The fact that they ruled the world at some point?
So the big concept for understanding giants, at least nowadays, is the Ordning.
Right.
So that's the idea. This is I think, one of the cooler ideas from giant lore that actually fits very well. We'll get into some stuff I don't like later. But the Ordning is the idea that every giant in the world is on a spectrum from best to worst. And they all agree that that spectrum is correct.
Wow.
So they each have different aspirations that will give them their ranking on the Ordning, but there is a scale, and you will fall somewhere on that scale. Everyone above you on that scale, you listen to. Everyone below that should listen to you. And what's interesting is they each approach that in different ways. So the Storm Giants, they're so cosmically in tune with the universe, they just intrinsically know where they fall on that scale.
Which is top.
Because Storm Giants are boring.
Top.
They're just top. But it's also relative between two Storm Giants. When two Storm Giants meet, they will just intrinsically know, oh, I should listen to this one, or that one should listen to me.
Which is annoying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's weird.
Huh.
With Cloud Giants, it's about who's got the best treasure. So they will be the most greedy of all the giants because that's how they establish their ranking in Cloud Giant lore. Cloud Giant Ordning is based on how much treasure they got.
It's wealth, it's magic power, it's just greedy kind of getting a horde going. Very dragon.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is very reminiscent of a dragon. One of the cool things that Cloud Giants do is they wear masks. They're like, the ancient Greek theater where everyone's got those giant masks of emotions.
Yeah, for comedy and tragedy so that the audience can see what emotion that they're trying to project for the people in the cheap seats.
Right. So Cloud Giants do that.
Oh.
If you're a powerful enough Cloud Giant, you've got a collection of masks for all your different emotions that you will swap out throughout the day so that people know what your emotion is without you have to actually put it on your face.
That's so interesting.
That's the kind of opulence we're talking here.
How did they get that with the beanstalk? Anyways.
Yeah, and this is, again, stuff doesn't always line up. So Frost Giants, their rank of the Ordning is based on the coolest thing they've hunted down and killed.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's I see this big monster here. If I can kill this big monster, it'll improve my ranking within Frost Giant hierarchy. So they will happily go after something that's above their ranking because if they pull it off.
That is a hook for an adventure. 100%. Yeah. The party comes across a wounded frost giant who's trying to maybe really out of their element. Let's say going up like a volcanic hill or whatever. And he's trying to go up the hill and they're like, what's wrong? He's like, I'm the son of the Jarl. I need to kill the red dragon up there. And they're like, what are you doing so far away from home? And he's like, well, my brother just killed a white dragon, so I need to up him big. I think that could be a really cool encounter. And by the way, I've had sessions where I fought along and against frost giants. Having a giant Viking on the team is just dope. It's just fun.
Yeah, no, although you can paint frost giants as just Vikings, the truth is that it's actually a strength more than a weakness because it gives you a culture to base them off of.
Very rich culture.
And then you can tweak it from there rather than the cloud giants where you're just kind of confused.
Yeah, it gives them an entire culture and mythology ability to base things on, and a way of speaking and an aesthetic. That's a lot more than what we're about to talk to, which is stone giants, I imagine.
Stone giants. Stone giants are weird. So their ordning is based on the quality of their best piece of art. So they'll take a long, long time working on this art to make the best thing, because it is literally their place in life is how good this piece of art is. But again, it makes them kind of just there because their goal is to make this really cool sculpture out of a rock in a cave somewhere. And that's a fine goal. Like you can't be mad at stone giants for doing what they do, but at the same time, as far as monster manual creatures go, stone giants have much less reason to fight a player character than basically 90% of the monster manual that you got there.
Yeah. And to be fair, I feel like there's another hook there, not to just keep giving people ideas. But what happens when you meet the stone giant that can't draw? You fought through the Underdark. You're dealing with mind flayers and drow. Drugar are just punching you when they minimize and then expand. It's a lot, right? They're invisible. And you come across this one stone giant who, let's say, has been captured by mind flayers. You release him, and then he's all depressed because he looks at his hands and he can't finish his masterpiece. Now you need to help him. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Or you could be you could be horrible and leave him. You help him, right? You help him.
Yeah.
Initiative to those who help him.
Stone giants don't do anything wrong.
Not initiative.
They don't do anything wrong.
Inspiration.
Stone giants are nice people.
Yes.
Sort of. So fire giants, in a similar way to stone giants, their ranking is based off of the quality of their craftsmanship.
Right.
So they are interested in making good stuff, but they do it in a weird, like, again, dwarf, like, greedy kind of way.
Okay.
Where it's like, I made this best thing and it's mine now. So it's like a pride outdoing each other sort of way.
It's so weird how they reflect different, like, you have Nordic culture, you have dragons, you have a lot of the dwarf things. Like, it's all in here, strangely enough, and they're all connected.
It's just all that. There's just so much giant lore.
Yeah.
There's almost too much.
It's almost too big.
Speaking of big,
oh my God.
Hill giants, their ordning is who's biggest.
Really?
Literally, who's biggest is the best hill giant.
You know, I kind of respect that the most. Like,
the problem is they don't realize that they're following the ordning by doing that.
Oh.
So the ordning is between all giants.
Right.
So you can be the best stone giant. You're still lower on the ordning than the worst cloud giant.
Right. But what I'm saying is, it's funny that hill giants are so dumb that they follow the ordning almost on the base concept of the ordning.
Exactly.
Which is interesting. Like, they're working off of instinct. And I don't know. I kind of like the idea of a hill giant looking at himself and being like, I'm not as big as him. I need to eat more to be bigger than you. And then they go down and eat a barn.
You have to be careful with that, though, because it is like a full point of giant culture that trying to usurp the ordning is not a good thing.
Oh, how do you mean?
So it's just regarded as an evil thing to do, to try and go against the ordning.
Oh.
So you can be your best self and all that stuff, and other giants will respect that where you are. But you should, once you find your spot, you should be at your spot. You're not really, it's not like a constant competition thing. It's a here's my presentation for what my worth is. Let me be judged on this for all eternity. Or not all eternity, but giants live a long time.
Right.
And process time slower. So giant fun fact. Every time a giant heart beats is 4 heartbeats for one of us.
What?
So they literally just process. Yeah, it's in Volo's guide. A stone giant's heart, for example, will beat once for every 4 heartbeats of a human. So they're just experiencing time slow.
Why?
I don't know.
Why? That's such a weird, like that's like how many flaps to a fucking hummingbird. Why are we doing this? That's so strange.
There's so much giant lore that there are literally 10 different deities for just giants.
Okay. Well,
I'm not going to go through all of them.
Sure.
But that's more than one per type. And that's more like you get goblins have like what, 3 for all the different goblin types?
It's more like 2.
And you run into goblins all over the place.
It's 2.
I was being generous with the third one. Third one. But you got giants, which I don't know how many campaigns you've run that have had giants in them or play that have had giants in them. You really don't run into giants that frequently.
No.
They'll show up, but rarely are you going to have such a giant focused campaign that you're going to need to worry about the 10 giant deities. It's just not, it's cool that it's there, but I don't need to know about the trickster giant god.
Well,
it's cool she exists, but when are you going to run into a trickster giant god follower?
First of all, Alaric, be the change you want to be in the world. Get that cleric going. And two, I like it that there's this much lore so that people can dive into it. Giants do feel like the replacement big bad boss. Like you want to do, let's say, a run up a mountain in a fight, but you don't want it to be a dragon again. Mm-hmm. So you do the dragon supplement. You do a giant. That's what they are, because giants apparently hate dragons and they fought dragons, and they have, like I said, typing like Pokemon, kind of like dragons. So they're just this easy replacement, but they're so much weirder in their lore because, like, for instance, I can kind of guess where a gold dragon is going, per se, right? In the sense of, you look at it and you're like, oh, he likes gems, he's good. You can kind of fathom what's going on. You put a stone giant in front of me, I don't know what culture I'm getting. I don't know where he's coming from. I don't know what his plans are. And then you get this weird hierarchy that you don't know about and these offshoots. Actually, let me ask you this. Here's a question. Okay. So a Cyclops, right? Does he know he's in the Ordning somewhere?
So here's the problem with giant lore.
Oh my God.
When you've got a whole bunch of giant lore, it doesn't all agree. So I believe the way it sits in 5e right now, if you're not one of the big 6, you're lower. But I'm not actually sure that Cyclops have been introduced into 5e to get that for them. It's just been for ogres and trolls and Fomorians, which, yeah, sure, those are all kind of quote-unquote lesser giant types.
Okay. Wouldn't it be funny if it's like, well, Cyclops is right above Fire Giant? Like, it's just like a weird hiccup.
That's the problem. It could be like that. We don't know.
Okay, so give me this. What is so giants rule the world, right? They have their ordning to decide their culture. And then what happens to them?
Why do they disappear? So if you ask a giant, they'll say that the red dragon Garrix, I came across that and I had to wonder who made up that name, because it's literally just Gary Gygax as a single word.
Yes, the creator of D&D, Garrix.
Yes, that red dragon starts a war with giants because giants are too wealthy. And basically, the dragons fight each other until no one who was part of the original war is left. And they kind of just beat each other into submission so that neither side can really keep running an empire.
Okay.
That's the problem. That's it. So that happens. The Allfather, I think Annam or Ammon.
He's the head god of the giants.
He's the guy who creates all the giants, says, you couldn't even beat the dragons, you're lame, and then he leaves. So all the giants are kind of abandoned by their deity, but in response, they kind of start worshiping his children as deities, and that's where you're starting to get into all those different, like, giant type deities, because each type has their own. And they have a lot of shades of, like, your Norse mythology deities, where, like, they kind of don't get along, but they also will get along sometimes.
Well, I was about to say.
So that I can appreciate the quality of giant deity pantheon, but I don't understand why it's there.
Right. Well, I gotta say, I mean, it's kind of that weird jumbled culture thing again, because unlike, Tiamat, which does have its name kind of ripped from ancient cultures, Tiamat is her own thing. And same with Bahamut, the platinum dragon god for dragons. And it's very, good and evil dragons worship the good god or the evil goddess. It's very kind of cut and dry, and it's very based in D&D. Giants feel like that hodgepodge with culture again, because isn't Amund, isn't that head god, he's considered the all-father. It's a very Nordic Odin thing, but isn't the Nordic guys just the frost giants?
And that's what's weird about it. So this is where I started to get frustrated when I was looking into giant lore. So there's a stipulation that the 6 giant breeds are reflections of his children.
Okay.
Of the All-Father's children.
The 10 of them.
But then it's also stated that the giant deities don't look like their kinds of giant.
Okay.
So Thrym, the frost giant deity, does not necessarily look like a frost giant. And it just raises questions. That's in like a single book. That's in Volo's Guide. It has both those statements. So there's some clear opposing camps on what a giant is and what giant culture is like. So, for example, also Thrym and Surtur, they're classically rivals. So that's your frost giant god and your fire giant god.
Right. Okay.
So they're classically rivals that will team up occasionally. They got the kind of Thor Loki dynamic going on.
Okay.
But that translates over to their species, where frost giants and fire giants don't get along. And that makes sense until you remember the Ordning, where giants will follow the Ordning, and that's like their whole culture. So you've got these two types of giants that are built up about how they don't like each other in a way that's exactly reprimanded by their overarching culture.
Right. So
it's just there's like in real mythology, you have to pick and choose what bits of giant lore you're going to use.
So let's say a frost giant and a fire giant can't really have a rivalry, because a frost giant will go to a fire giant and still be like, well, I'm your better. So
right.
Yeah. just FYI.
They don't make sense if you look at the big, there's two facts, both of which are fun on their own, but when put together create a contradiction.
So that's where, as a DM, what is your tip for a DM who wants to use giants in their campaigns?
I think you make your giants what you want them to be, and you play fast and loose with the rules about how giants work in D&D. Because chances are people haven't studied their D&D giant lore enough to be upset at you for doing something different.
Okay.
I think you have to take the concept of what each giant type is and keep that true, because they're good concepts. There's solid baseline concepts, but you have to figure out your like perspective on the concept.
Okay.
Here's another good example. So hill giants have this game called Stuff.
All right.
So it's a game where they see how many goblins or kobolds or halflings they can put in their mouth without swallowing them. So that's a great idea for a game for hill giants to play, because they're dumb and stupid and brutish.
Sure.
But when you look at canonical sizes, a hill giant is only 16 feet tall.
They can't fit that.
How can you fit a 3-foot tall thing into your mouth if you're 16 feet tall? Let alone how many you can fit in. So like it's clearly the person who came up with stuff is envisioning like a massive giant that can have a game like that. Right. And it's a great game for a giant, but it doesn't match with what hill giants are if you go by the rules.
But here's the thing, though. I like the spirit of, like, I'm with you. I like the spirit of the game.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of that before, but yeah, you're right. The guy who created that clearly was thinking of a giant going to a
It's like 30, 40 foot tall.
Yeah.
He's towering above things. He's got space in his mouth for that.
Going to like a shire full of halflings as they're screaming and running around, him and his friend, picking them up and putting the whole Ferger family into their mouth. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
It's again, two fine facts. 16 feet, that's a fine size for a giant.
Sure, it's big.
Able to have a game about stuffing things in its mouth and not swallowing them, fine game for a giant. You look at both of them together, they're a contradiction. And there's so much good giant lore, but it doesn't make sense as a single picture.
So, okay. So the for DMs, play fast and loose with it and do your angle. If you want them more Nordic, if you want them bigger, if you want them to be dumber, smarter, following the ordning, maybe keep to the ordning. That seems to be like a big...
The ordning, I think, is your best hallmark if you want to ring true on giant culture.
Okay.
I think that is, if I pick a big concept of what is key to the giants, if you're using multiple giants, if you're just using one type of giant, maybe use their ordning subcategory, but you don't have to go into the whole big cosmic ordning thing.
Right, because it is 2 levels, weirdly enough. There's the overarching ordning, which is storm giants, cloud giants, yada, yada. And then there's the actual inner workings of each particular type's culture, which is already kind of crazy and a little bit elaborate, because I do want to see fire giants and frost giants fight. And I don't like the idea of a frost giant just looking at a fire giant and going, nah. Or even still, maybe storm giants are nomadic, not nomadic. They're isolated.
They're nomadic too.
Okay.
They're storm. It's easy to think of storm giants as just the hippie giant.
Okay. Well, okay. Storm giants are
like a cosmically powerful hippie.
Right. They're locked away. They're powerful hippies. They're kind of isolated to themselves. I like the idea of an evil masked cloud giant sending a party out to get the stuff of a storm giant. But to do that, you kind of have to be like, well, I'm ignoring the ordinary.
Right.
Which could be a fun thing for a villain to do. Or you could just be like, it doesn't work on the cosmic scale. It works culturally. So that's interesting. Wait a minute. I'm going back to stuff. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I have to go back to it. In the game stuff, you have to it's the whole halfling, right?
Right. It's the whole halfling, the whole goblin, the kobold. It's you take a small little creature that is like a tribal thing, but you can just like plop yourself down in their village and have a whole bunch at once.
Okay. So you can't do the I got his arm, I got his leg. It has to be the whole thing.
It's how many of them can you have in your mouth without swallowing?
That's hilarious. That is
it's a very hill giant game. It just doesn't work out when you look at their sizes.
So hill giants have gods too, though, since they have
they have one. Oh, I knew his name. It's like Garalek or Garnek or something like that. He is confusing.
Okay.
So he just eats a whole ton of stuff, and that's his thing, is he's never full. But he keeps insisting that he's the equal of the other giant brothers because he's as strong as them. Even though he's not as strong as them, and he doesn't do anything else besides eat stuff and claim to be as strong as them. Those are like his 2 things that he does. And like when they get mad at him for stealing their food and trying to claim that he's their equal, then he runs away. And that's like the entirety of his lore. So it's again not listening to the ordning. If it's the ordning, he should know that he's not their equal because he's clearly not in a practical sense either. So it's just there's so much good lore in giant lore,
right? But
you really will have to pick and choose what facts you're taking and what facts you're leaving. But they have this concept of Mach and Mog,
right?
Where things are good or bad in like a holistic sense, but it doesn't directly translate over. So there's a lot of cool potential in there, and it's more lore than you get for like Yuan-ti. I feel like you can describe more about giant culture than you can about Yuan-ti culture.
Sure. Well, Yuan-ti culture is just we're trying to become snake gods. Full stop.
Right. So that's the open and close of Yuan-ti culture. But you can't open and close giant culture in that same way, despite the fact that when a player is encountering a giant, they're probably not going to be part of giant culture that much.
Sure. But here's the thing, though. The fact that there's so much giant culture out there, here's what I think when it comes to like giants as an encounter. I think giants can work in a lot of ways, and I feel like they're a fun physical encounter for a party. And if you use their culture in the correct way, you might be able to help the players down the road. For instance, maybe they have a hill giant who's rampaging through, we'll say, a town and playing stuff, we'll say. And they need to convince this hill giant to stop. They're level 1. They're too weak, but they still got to convince him to stop. So how do they do that? They're smart. They start talking to the hill giant, and eventually the hill giant says something to the akin of Mott and Mog. Right? They put 2 plus 2 together and they realize, oh, with giants, Mott is good and Mog is bad, right? So then they're able to convince them that stuff, while fun, is Mog or something. And while it depresses the hill giant, he might leave. Or maybe they convince him that if he doesn't play stuff, he'll grow or something like that. Or please his god, or be able to bone the nice, pretty other hill giant over the corner. Whatever. Then later on in the campaign, when they're faced with a frost giant, when they head up north, and they're talking to the frost giant kings, like the Jarl of the frost giants, the king, they say that something is Mog. They say that doing a certain thing that maybe the Jarl wants is Mog. And suddenly that concept of giant culture comes back, and the players feel smart for remembering that. So that could be a fun thing to use. And mentioning even the Ordning or something like that. That could be a fun tool for a player. I don't know how much some of this, there are some fun facts that you've given me that I'm like, that's cool. I just don't know how to use it as a DM.
No, it's the thing. There's stuff in there about giants that it feels like someone was just having fun making lore about giants.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot on the wall that just does and does not stick. And it's a fun physical encounter. I feel like they're kind of, I know I called them a dragon substitute, but if you're a DM and you kind of want to throw people a sideball, I think a giant is a fine kind of mix them up monster a little bit. Not a dragon.
Yeah, those boulders will mess you up, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they do throw boulders. And don't they each have like a special kind of boulder that they throw?
They all have their own special types of boulders because they're like that.
That's hilarious. That's adorable. Like, oh, look, he's got his new nice special boulder.
Unless you're a storm giant, then you throw lightning bolts because you're extra.
That's true. That's fine. I'm okay with that. And well, that's Zeus.
Yeah.
Where are these cultures coming from?
I don't know. That's the thing.
So a storm giant is a hippie isolated Zeus. A cloud giant is a Jack and the Beanstalk masked wizard. That's a cloud giant. A stone giant is a I don't know, liberal arts degree dropout painter in the Underdark. Then you have frost giants who are Vikings. Then you have fire giants who are dwarves without the
dwarves plus slavery.
And then you have hill giants who are just fat, dumb, big people. Oh man, that is a lot. And then you have everybody else. Then you have like 30 other things that all have deep, meaningful lore that is important to somebody somewhere. I agree, as a DM that looks daunting, but you should use what you can from the lore. And you're right. I don't think there's going to be that many adventurers who are experts, unless
I think there's a lot of untapped potential in giants.
Sure.
There's a lot of for how rarely you see them used. There's a lot that you can do with them.
Unless the player is a Goliath. So like all D&D types of things, eventually the players want to be them too. And that's, they see a bird creature, they want to be a bird. They see a cat, they want to be a cat. They see a lion, they want to be a lion. They see a snake, they want to be a snake. They do it to everything, including dragons. Dragons now have half dragonborn, right? They want to be a devil, they become a tiefling. So every big type or class of, or category, I should say, of monster usually trickles down into a race. And giants are sort of not the exception. They sort of are, they sort of aren't, because there's the Goliaths, who are, yes, kind of giants, we think. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was hoping you weren't going to bring up Goliaths because they're in a funky place in the lore.
How funky?
I believe how funky?
How funky?
I believe they're in the same tier as the Tiefling, where it's like giant ancestry way back when.
Okay.
But it doesn't translate the same way because there are definitely their own people that live in their own tribes, isolated from society in a way that Tieflings aren't.
Huh.
So it's funky because like your Tiefling is kind of your like, oh, this child grew up to be a Tiefling, exile it to the streets.
Right. There's demon blood somewhere. Get it out.
That's easy. But you don't get Goliaths showing up. A Goliath comes from a tribe of Goliaths that have giant ancestry ? But they're kind of their own people with their own traditions. They look kind of like stone giants, but they're not really tied to stone giants in a real way, particularly now that stone giants are in the Underdark. So they're kind of just there and vaguely related to giants.
And they're strong. And if I was going to assign them a culture, it's kind of Frost Giant-y, right? They do
it's like Frost Giant with a more tribal side to it, which is a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, where they're
like you get a lot more they're very warrior focused. They're one of those races that seems typecast to be always the fighter barbarian type.
Well, yeah, I'll be honest. I've never seen a bard.
And I get that. Right. But to me, it does. I don't. Those kind of classes always like a dwarf thief or a dwarf wizard is rare, but is less rare than a Goliath wizard or a Goliath thief. And it's strange to me that you introduce a new race that's really so heavily suited towards one thing, and to have their culture also be so heavily suited towards one thing. And it feels like with how many races we've got going on right now, it's a shame that the Goliath is so focused. They're slanted to be the barbarian.
I almost think, and this might be a bad prediction. This could be a bad take, but hot take.
Okay.
I kind of think with Volo's Guide how it's strange. I love Volo's Guide just because it's like, hey, we got aberrations, we got mind flayers, we got beholders. And you know what? We'll give you some giants too. It's a weird thing to just be like, we're the aberration book. Here's some giants. And we're all like, thank you. But I think Volo's Guide is a very popular book. There's a giant on the cover, interestingly enough. I think since I've been seeing this rising population of, well, right now, satyrs because of Mythic Odyssey of Theros.
Because of magic resistance, bro.
Well, also, they are a bard race, which is hilarious.
No, that's true.
Yeah, no, you get to be the fun satyr.
You could do a satyr fighter.
That'd be fun.
In a way that you really couldn't do a Goliath bard. And that's what's strange to me, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. But jumping back to it, in the same way that, let's say, I noticed that Ganassi are pretty popular. They're the elemental people. That's right. We have elemental people. Fish people, bird people, snake people, elemental people. These people are related to fucking genies. It's so weird. But again, if there's a category, we have a race for it so that you can play it. I noticed that Ganassi are pretty popular. I think they are, and I think the reason why they are is because they come in categories and kind of pick your favorite, and yay, I'm fire. I kind of think that since Goliaths are kind of their own thing, we might still get a giant race down the road that jumps into subtypes, that might have your storm giant, cloud giant, fire giant, hill giant subtypes.
Oh, it's like a half giant kind of deal.
Yeah, I think that ever since Ganassi are popular for that in a sense, and Tieflings got a ton of new sub-races for each layer of hell, and a Dragonborn can be any kind of breath weapon and scales or whatever. D&D is all about customization when it comes to actually creating a character, and giants are on the cusp of being really integrated in everybody playing them. But they're not, because their lore is weird, and we don't have a race for them yet, kind of, in the sense of a player. And also, what is their culture, kind of? And I think Volo's Guide kind of mainstreams it, but then also, we'll say stuffs it too much, and adds like weird little lore bits that kind of blow it up.
Yeah.
It's this very strange balancing act. So my hot take is down the road, we're going to get a subtype race. The only other race that we haven't gotten yet is the aberration race of some kind of mind flayer and or beholder. And let me tell you, if you fuckers don't think a beholder born is going to be canon soon, you guys are insane. Okay? They do everything.
I don't want it.
Wizards of the Coast wants your money.
Don't want it.
All right?
Don't want it.
Listen, I agree. It's a bad idea, but guess what? Everybody loves mind flayers. Yo, like it's gonna happen. I'm just saying it happened with Dragonborn. It's happening again. It's what's gonna happen.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's just I already have beef with how many playable races there are in 5e.
There are thousands. There's actually
yes.
Here's how many there are, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but when it comes to Mythic Odyssey of Theros, I was floored that we have another feline race again. We have lions.
Yep.
Think about that. That means that Tabaxi, who used to be kind of the catch-all cat, are now just kind of domestic cats, and we might get like tigers and leopards and shit. That's kind of nuts. And that also means that a Kakra and Kenku, the bird races, we could have an owl race at some point. Either way, there's a lot of stuff going on. When it comes to giants, though, I think we're still waiting on that race. So, I don't know. Goliaths kind of work, but they're also kind of their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Alaric, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap this thing up. It's already been a whirlwind of a strange episode with what giants are. Again, DMs, if you're using them, play a bit fast and loose with this one, okay?
Yeah.
Look into their stats, their big melee combat thing, and enjoy them. Now, for just the final thing, do you got any other fun facts for us just to end it out?
I mean, for me, the weirdest fun fact was still the heartbeat thing. It just, I don't get what the point of that fact is.
There isn't one. It's just being strange, man. We're just having fun out here.
I get that they live hundreds of years. They're very ant-like in that they're like, if I say soon as a giant, that could mean a couple weeks or a couple years even. That's still soon to a giant.
That's fun.
They see time differently to the point that it affects their heart rate. And that's just such a weird.
Why add time?
This is maybe the weirdest thing I've seen.
To all of this, why add like the experience of time itself? I don't know.
And at a factor of 4.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Either way, though, thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. We're ending it here. We might do a Giants part 2 because I don't think we're done. I'm going to be honest. Alaric, you can absolutely come back in and we could tackle maybe like Storm King's Thunder and maybe kind of dig into the different concepts of Giants. We'll see what people want.
Sure.
Like, share, subscribe. Contact us on our social medias.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, Ko-Fi /DumpStat Podcast.
We also have Rhyme of the Frost Maiden that's coming out soon. Thank you, a cleric. And I think I might try to kill my players with the giant soon. So that's fun, I guess.
It'll be weird.
It will be weird. We'll have them test its heartbeat or something. Thank you for playing, and thank you for recording with me. Thank you all for listening. I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks, bud.
You've just been listening to DumpStat, a podcast presented by Horizon Kingdoms. Horizon Kingdoms is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition server that's free to play. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and join up on Discord to join in on a new adventure. For more DumpStat, be sure to find us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe.